The last seat on the Route 9 bus went to a stranger. Marcus Deal had been standing at the corner of Fulton and Crane for 22 minutes in the rain before the bus finally came. He was wearing the only suit jacket he owned, a dark navy one he had pressed the night before with a borrowed iron and a dish towel, and by the time the doors folded open, the shoulders were soaked through and the colour had darkened to almost black. He climbed on behind 6 other people, found the aisle packed shoulder to shoulder, and told himself it was fine. He had stood before. He would stand again. He was 34 years old, 3 weeks from losing his apartment on Delmar Street, and on his way to a job interview that started at 9 o'clock. It was 8:41. He did not have a car. He did not have a backup plan. He had a resume printed at the public library the previous afternoon, tucked inside a manila folder, now softening at the edges from the wet. What Marcus did not know, as he gripped the overhead bar and watched the rain streak down the windows, was that the woman who had just boarded 2 stops before him and taken the last open seat was named Claudette Okafor. He did not know that she was 51 years old and had not ridden one of her own buses in nearly 4 years. He did not know that she had gotten on at Fulton wearing no company badge, no title, and a plain grey raincoat she had owned since her daughter started high school. He did not know any of it. He just saw a woman sitting alone, and he saw that she was soaking wet, and he saw that her eyes were closed and her shoulders were turned inward, the way a person's shoulders turn when they are past the edge of something and try not to show it. He let go of the overhead bar and tapped her on the sleeve. If you want to comment on the kind of man who does that, on a bus like that, in rain like that, before an interview that could change everything he had left, go ahead. Leave it below. This story has a lot to say about what a small thing like that costs and what it turns into. She opened her eyes and looked up at him. She had a round face, no makeup, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and an expression that was somewhere between grateful and suspicious. The look of a woman who had learned that gestures from strangers did not always come free. "I'm getting off at the next stop," Marcus said. It was not true. He was getting off at 12, 4 stops ahead. She started to say something, and he shook his head gently and reached up, pulled his folded umbrella from under his arm and set it on the seat beside her. "You'll need this more than I will," he said. "The stop on Crane doesn't have a shelter." She looked at the umbrella. She looked at him. She said, "You're already wet." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said. "I'm already wet." He moved to the back of the bus and stood the rest of the way to 12th Street, and then stepped out into the rain and jogged 4 blocks to the building where his interview was being held, and he arrived at 8:59 with his folder soft as cloth and his jacket dark as a bruise and his left shoe making a sound with every step. He did not know that she was watching him through the rain-blurred window as the bus pulled away. He did not know that she had turned in her seat to watch him go. He did not know what she was thinking. He was thinking about how to explain the state of his suit. Marcus Deal had grown up in the Parkway Terrace neighborhood on the south side of the city, the youngest of 3 boys in a house where the ceiling in the second bedroom had leaked for so long that his mother had simply moved his brother's beds and put a pot on the floor and said a prayer. His father, Darnell, had worked for the city water department for 18 years before a back injury sent him into the kind of slow, grinding disability that ate what savings a family had the way termites work through a floor joist, invisible until the thing gives out. His mother, Patricia, had worked the register at a grocery store on Clement Avenue until the store closed, and then she had cleaned offices in the financial district from 5 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and then she had come home and cooked dinner. And she had done this without complaint for years and years. And Marcus had watched every day of it. He had been the one in the family who finished college, a degree in business administration from the State University, paid for with financial aid, and 2 jobs and a 3rd-shift custodial position that left him walking to his 8 o'clock classes, still smelling faintly of mop solution. He had graduated 11 years ago. He had worked in logistics coordination for a freight company for 6 of those years, and then the company had been acquired and his division had been eliminated, and he had spent the last 14 months trying to find something, anything, that paid what the old job had paid. 63 applications, 11 interviews before today. No offers. He had borrowed money from his brother Andre to cover 2 months of rent, and then borrowed from his brother Leon to cover a third. And now the balance on both loans sat in the back of his mind like a stone he carried everywhere. He sent his mother $40 a month when he could, which was not always. He had sold his car, a 2014 hatchback, in January for $3,000, and the $3,000 had lasted 4 months. The interview was for an operations coordinator position at a regional delivery company called Inland Transit Services. The salary would have been, 14 months ago, a lateral move. Now it felt like a rescue. The woman at the front desk gave his wetsuit one long look and handed him a paper towel without being asked. He thanked her. He sat in a waiting area chair with his folder on his knee and his left shoe pressed flat to the carpet, and he went over the talking points he had rehearsed in his bathroom mirror 3 nights running. The hiring manager's name was Glenn Pruitt. He was a trim man in his early 50s with reading glasses on a cord, and the manner of someone who moved through his days with a clipboard he no longer needed to actually hold. Shook Marcus's hand, noted the suit without comment, and led him down a corridor to a small conference room where a second person was already seated, a woman in her 30s named Dana, who wrote things on a yellow pad. The interview lasted 40 minutes. Pruitt opened by asking Marcus to walk him through the freight company years, not the resume version, but the real version, what the work had looked like from the inside. Marcus told him. He talked about the routing software and the carrier relationships, and the 3 years he had spent on the overnight scheduling team before moving to daytime coordination. He talked about the acquisition with the same plainness he used for everything else. When the division was eliminated, Pruitt said, "Did you see it coming?" "I saw something coming," Marcus said. "I didn't know what shape it would take." Pruitt nodded. "What did you do with the 14 months? Marcus told him that too. He said he had applied to 63 positions. He said he had been honest with himself about which ones he was underqualified for and had applied anyway, because the alternative was a smaller list that paid less and he could not afford a smaller list. He said he had kept a spreadsheet tracking each application, the date, the job title, the contact's name, the status, which he updated every Thursday. He said it had helped him feel like he was managing something instead of being managed by it. Dana wrote something on the yellow pad that took a moment. Pruitt looked at the folder Marcus had placed on the table, the one with the soft edges. "Tell me what operations means to you," Pruitt said. Marcus thought for a moment. "It means the difference between a plan and what actually happens," he said. "You can draw a route on a map. You can set a schedule. The operations part is everything that exists between the line on the map and the moment somebody steps off a bus and gets where they needed to go." There was a pause. Pruitt was looking at him steadily. "And when the map and the reality don't match, and you don't adjust the map," Marcus said, "you go find out what's happening on the ground and you fix that." At the end, Pruitt thanked him for coming in and told him they would be in touch within the week. His tone gave nothing away, which Marcus had learned was not necessarily a bad sign, only a careful one. Marcus rode the bus home. He sat this time because the bus was less full. He watched the rain slide down the window and counted the stop announcements and tried not to assign meaning to things that did not yet have any. The woman from that morning was not on the bus. He had not expected her to be. She had started her career at a city transit authority, not in an office, but at a depot. She had been 23 years old, a communications degree from a historically black university, and she had talked her way into a dispatcher role that everyone around her seemed to assume she would leave within a year for something more fitting for a woman with her degree and her posture. She had stayed for 11 years. She had learned every route, every maintenance cycle, every union rule, every complaint pattern from the customer lines. She had risen to regional manager, and then to regional director, and then, 9 years ago, she had left the transit authority altogether. What she left for was a company she had incorporated herself, out of a desire she had carried for most of her adult life and a business plan she had drafted long before the financing existed to make it real. She called it Meridian Transit LLC, And in its first year it had operated one route, a single bus on a corridor the city had quietly let decay, a route that ran through neighborhoods the main authority served infrequently, and the private car services reached only at prices the people in those neighborhoods could not afford. 9 years later, Meridian Transit operated 22 routes across 3 counties, 314 employees, 47 vehicles, an annual ridership number that had grown each year of operation. She had taken on a partner in year 4, a quiet man named Harold Birch, who handled the financing side and left the operations entirely to her. And she had never regretted it. She did not ride her own buses as a rule. Not because she was above it, because she had learned in her first years of running the company that being known on the route changed what she saw. Drivers tightened up, regular riders became self-conscious. The thing she was trying to observe, which was the actual daily experience of getting on and riding and getting off, the thing her company existed to make decent for people, stopped being itself the moment she was recognized. So she wore the grey raincoat and the pushed-up reading glasses, and she rode when she needed to see something. She had been on Route 9 that morning because a cluster of complaints had come in over the previous 3 weeks about that corridor. Overcrowding at the Fulton stops, a shelter on Crane that had been out of service for 6 days, late arrivals at the 12th Street end. She had a facilities crew assigned to the Crane shelter. She had a scheduling review already on the books. She had gotten on the bus to understand the shape of the problem with her own body before she signed off on the solutions. She had not expected the man in the wetsuit jacket. She thought about him on the ride back to her office. She thought about the way he had said, "I'm getting off at the next stop," with the particular quality of a man telling a small, kind lie without discomfort, the way people do when they have practiced small kindnesses long enough that the slight awkwardness of an untruth sits easier than the alternative. She thought about how he had handed her the umbrella and kept moving before she could make more of it. She thought about his folder, soft from rain, and the way he had pressed it against his chest for the last stop. She did not know his name. She did not know where he had been going. She had not asked, because the moment had not offered itself to asking, and she was not in the habit of pressing. Back at her office, she changed out of the wet raincoat and hung it on the hook behind her door, and sat down with the Route 9 complaint file and the facilities report and the scheduling data she had requested the week before. She worked through it methodically the way she worked through everything. The Crane shelter was a straightforward fix, already in process. The overcrowding at Fulton was a frequency problem. 2 additional runs added to the morning window would distribute the load. The 12th Street delays were a timing issue at the depot, resolvable without a route redesign. She marked the adjustments, sent 3 emails, and held her afternoon review. She did good work that afternoon. Her hands were on the work, and her mind was partly somewhere else. She thought about the umbrella. Not the object, exactly, but the fact of it. The fact that he had had it and had given it away to a stranger without calculation, and the particular quality of his departure afterward, the way he had moved to the back of the bus and not looked back, as if the giving had been complete and did not require witnessing. In her experience, generosity that required witnessing was a different thing from generosity that did not. The kind that did not was rarer. It was also the only kind that accumulated into anything. She found herself at her desk that afternoon, thinking about a man who had nothing to spare and had given away the last of his dry things so that a stranger would not have to stand in the rain. She did not think it was an accident that he had been on her bus. She did not know what else to call it. The call came on a Wednesday. Marcus had been sitting at his kitchen table sorting through bills when his phone rang, and a woman's voice that was not Dana and was not Glenn Pruitt told him that Inland Transit Services would like to offer him the operations coordinator position at a starting salary of $47,000 and asked if he was still interested. He said yes. Before she had finished the sentence, he wrote the start date on the back of an envelope, the 12th of the following month, and he sat for a long time after the call ended with the phone still in his hand. He called Andre first. He called Leon second. He called his mother third, and when Patricia Deal picked up, Marcus told her, and she said, quietly, "Thank you, Lord," not to him, but to the room, the ceiling, the years. And then she asked if he had eaten, and he said he had. He had not. He went out and bought a bag of groceries with the last of what he had in his checking account, and he cooked himself a real meal for the first time in 3 weeks, and he sat and ate it and let the fact of what had happened settle in slowly, the way good things sometimes have to settle before they feel real. On the morning of his first day, Marcus put on the navy suit jacket, which he had taken to a dry cleaner on Clement with the last $8 he had, and he rode the Route 9 bus to work. He did not see the woman in the grey raincoat. He watched the stops, he watched the shelter-run crane, which now had its plexiglass panels back in place and its bench cleaned and a new light fixture over the door. He had noticed it was out on the morning of the interview the way a person notices things they have lived around long enough to read. He noticed now that it was fixed. He got off at 12th Street and walked 4 blocks to the Inland Transit Services building and checked in at the front desk and was taken to the operations floor, which was larger than he had expected, and introduced to a team of 7 people, and given a desk with a computer and a badge, and he sat down and started the work. The work was good. It was the kind of work Marcus understood in a way that felt almost physical, the way a person understands a language they were raised in. He had spent years inside logistics at the freight company, which was a different kind of operation, harder goods and longer distance, and a different vocabulary of delay, but the underlying shape of the problem was the same. Something needed to get from one place to another reliably, and people's lives adjusted themselves around the assumption that it would. He learned the route maps first, printing them out and taping them to the wall next to his desk and studying them the way he had studied before exams in college, which was slowly and in sequence, until the geography was in him rather than in front of him. He learned the scheduling software, which was a generation behind what the freight company had used, and spent 2 evenings at home working through its manual. And by the end of the first week, he had found 3 recurring errors in the automated timing calculations that had been generating small discrepancies in the driver logs. He flagged them to the system manager in a quiet email that did not announce what he had found so much as ask whether it was a known issue. The system manager replied the next morning it was not a known issue. By the end of his first month, Glenn Pruitt had started pulling him into meetings he had not been originally invited to, and Marcus sat in those meetings and answered questions when asked and listened carefully when not. He was good at listening. He had learned it from years of watching people who talked over him and years of watching people who did not, and understanding which kind saw more. In his 3rd month, Inland Transit Services received a contract proposal from a regional holding company to expand its service into 2 additional counties. The expansion was substantial enough that Pruitt brought in a small project team to evaluate the scope, and Marcus was put on that team alongside Dana and a man named Carl who handled compliance and a younger analyst named Priya who had been with the company for 8 months. The team was given 3 weeks and a shared file drive and a standing Thursday morning check-in. Marcus spent the first Thursday pulling existing ridership data for the current routes, the second pulling demographic and commute pattern data for the 2 proposed counties, and the evenings of both weeks building a model that weighted the data against the company's actual operational capacity, vehicle inventory, driver hours, and maintenance windows. He built it in a spreadsheet first and then wrote it up in a document of 11 pages with free charts and a set of phased implementation recommendations organized by risk level, low to high, with the logic behind each ranking written out plainly so that a person who did not know the data could follow the reasoning. He did not think it was a standout document. He thought it was a careful one. Pruitt took it to the senior leadership meeting on a Thursday morning and did not tell Marcus before he went. What Marcus did not know, because there was no reason he would have known, was that Inland Transit Services had been a subsidiary of Meridian Holdings for the past 3 years. The acquisition had been quiet, the kind of transaction that makes a paragraph in a trade publication and is otherwise absorbed into the operational structure without fanfare. He did not know that the holding company overseeing the contract proposal was at its operating heart Claudette. He did not know that the briefing document Pruitt presented on a Thursday morning had been read that same afternoon by Claudette, who had set it on her desk and read it twice, and then called Pruitt in a follow-up at 4:30 and asked who had put the analysis together. He did not know any of it. He was eating lunch at his desk, a sandwich he had brought from home, watching a bus tracker on his monitor to see whether the afternoon Route 9 southbound was running on time. Pruitt called him in on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Marcus knocked, stepped inside, and found Pruitt standing behind his desk rather than sitting, which was the first signal that this was not a routine meeting. The second signal was that there was someone else in the room, a woman in a charcoal blazer, sitting in the chair across from the desk, with her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and a plain expression that gave nothing away. Marcus had not seen her since the morning of the rain. He did not recognize her immediately, and the not recognizing was disorienting in a way that took him a moment to understand. He had not seen her face clearly that morning, not really. He had seen a woman who was tired and wet and needed a seat. He had taken in the round face and the reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and the grey of the raincoat, and then he had handed her the umbrella and moved to the back of the bus, and that had been the end of it. He had not stored the image the way you store the image of someone you expect to see again. Now she was in a chair in his supervisor's office, and he was looking at her, and something in him was doing a slow, uncertain reckoning, the way your eyes do when they land on a thing and tell you it's familiar before the rest of you has worked out how. She was watching him. Her expression was carefully neutral, but there was something in it, a slight attention at the corners of her eyes, a stillness that was too deliberate to be ordinary stillness, and that was when it happened. The rain and the bus and the umbrella and the soft folder and the 4 blocks in the rain came back all at once, and he understood. He felt the bottom drop out of his chest in a way that was not quite embarrassment and not quite recognition, but was something of both. "Marcus," Glenn Pruitt said, "this is Claudette Okafor. She is the founder and CEO of Meridian Holdings, which, as you may be aware, is the parent company of Inland Transit Services. She asked to meet you." Marcus said nothing for a moment. He looked at her and she looked at him, and something moved between them. That was the specific, quiet charge of 2 people confirming a thing they each were not entirely sure of. "Route 9, he said. "Route 9, she said. Pruitt looked between them and appeared to understand that he had just been made a bystander to something that did not require him. Pruitt looked between them and appeared to understand that he had just been made a bystander to something that did not require him. She stood and offered her hand, and Marcus shook it. She had a firm handshake and steady eyes. Dark brown behind the glasses, she had now pushed back down. "I read your briefing document," she said. "The route projection methodology. The way you structured the ridership growth model across the 2 counties. That was your work?" "Yes," Marcus said. "It was good work," she said. "Better than good." She paused, not for effect, but the way a person pauses when they are deciding how plainly to say the next thing. "I want to talk to you about a director-level position on the expansion project team. The project is 18 months. If it goes well, the role becomes permanent." Marcus was quiet for a moment. In that moment, he thought about the bus on a rainy morning and the woman's closed eyes and turned-in shoulders, and the umbrella he had set down beside her, and the 4 blocks he had jogged in the rain with his folder going soft and his left shoe filling with water. He thought about 63 applications and 14 months and $3,000 that lasted 4 months, and the phone call that came on a Wednesday. He thought about the navy suit jacket hanging in his apartment and his mother's voice saying "thank you" to the ceiling. "I want to hear about it," he said. The conversation lasted an hour. Pruitt excused himself after the first 10 minutes and left them in the conference room, with the door closed and a legal pad on the table between them. Claudette walked Marcus through the expansion scope, the counties, the routes, the community engagement process, the timeline. She asked him questions that had nothing to do with his resume, questions about how he thought about failure in logistics operations, about what he had seen in his time at the freight company that the new company should not repeat. He answered her honestly, which was the only way he knew how to answer. At the end of the hour, she told him she would have a formal offer drafted by the following Wednesday. She told him the salary band. It was $32,000 more than he was making. He rode the Route 9 bus home. He sat by the window and watched the shelter at Crane go by, lit now and clean, and he thought about what had just happened and tried to hold it carefully, the way you hold something that feels like it could tip if you move too fast with it. There was a woman across the aisle who was carrying 3 grocery bags and a tote, and had a child's drawing poking out of the top of the tote, a sun in orange crayon, and a green figure beneath it that might have been a person or might have been a tree. Marcus looked at it for a long time. The bus smelled like rain and close air and somebody's dinner, warm and starchy, coming from one of the bags. He thought about his mother. He thought about the $8 at the dry cleaner. He thought about the umbrella he did not own anymore, which he had forgotten to retrieve and had not gone back for, because, going back for, it would have made more of the moment than he intended. He thought the city looked different, through a clean window. The following Wednesday, the offer arrived by email at 8:47 in the morning. Marcus read it 3 times at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before he finished. He read it a 4th time. He read the salary line and the title line and the start date and the benefit summary, and then he set the laptop aside and looked at the wall of his kitchen for a long time. The wall had a calendar on it that he had gotten free from a pharmacy on Clement, the kind with the generic landscape photographs, a mountain for January, a lake for February, and so on. He had been using it to track his application deadlines. There were marks all over it, dates and initials and small notations he had made in pencil. March had so many marks on it that the photo beneath was barely visible. April had fewer. The current month had 3. He looked at the calendar and thought about the 14 months it represented. The marks and the waiting and the Thursday evening spreadsheet updates and the borrowed money and the dry cleaner receipt for $8 that he had kept for no reason, tucked in the back of his desk drawer like a document of something. He called Andre. He called Leon. He called Patricia Deal, and this time he did not say anything for a moment, and his mother said his name quietly, Marcus, the way she said it when she was paying close attention, and he said, Mama, I got something to tell you, and he told her. She said, I always knew. She said it simply and without performance. I always knew it was going to come around. He did not say anything to that. He did not need to. He signed the offer and sent it back, and then took the calendar off the wall and set it in the recycling and looked at the clean square on the paint where it had been. He had one more thing to do. He had thought about it on and off for the 3 days since the meeting in Pruitt's office, and he had not been able to decide whether it was necessary or whether it crossed some line of propriety he could not name. He thought about it for another 10 minutes at his kitchen table, and then he decided that it was necessary. He went to the desk in his bedroom where he kept the few things he held on to, and he took out a single sheet of paper and he wrote a short note, 11 lines, to Claudette. He did not write about the offer. He did not write about the salary or the expansion project or the 18 months. He wrote about the Route 9 bus and the morning of the rain, but not about the umbrella, not really, not directly. He wrote about how he had come from a family of people who had given things away when they did not have them to spare, and how he had grown up watching his mother give things, her time, her quiet, her dinner plate, and how he had never understood it as a strategy or a calculation, only as the way she moved through the world. And how he had come to understand that a person's way of moving through the world was not separate from who they were, but was exactly who they were. He wrote, near the end, I don't know what you saw that morning. I don't know if it means anything to you, but I want you to know that it was just how I was raised. My mother taught me that. He sealed the note in an envelope. He addressed it to her at the Meridian Holdings office. He put a stamp on it and walked to the corner mailbox on Delmar Street, the one he walked past every morning, and he dropped it in. Then he went back inside and got his things and caught the Route 9 bus to work. Claudette read the note on a Thursday morning, standing at her desk, which was her habit when she read things she thought might matter. The envelope had arrived in the morning mail with a first-class stamp and her name written by hand in a careful block print. She had assumed at first that it was a complaint of the kind she occasionally received directly, routed through the main office when a rider felt that their concern had not been adequately addressed through the standard channels. It was not that. She read it twice. She set it on the desk and looked at the window for a long time. The city outside was overcast, a white flat sky with the buildings holding still in it, and down below she could see the top of a bus shelter on Meridian Avenue, her company's name on the side panel in clean white letters. She had built the company out of a conviction that the way a city moves tells you what it thinks of its people. Not its stated values, not its mission documents, not the speeches given at ribbon cuttings, but the way it actually moves, which neighborhoods get the frequent routes and the working shelters and the clean benches, and which neighborhoods get the gaps in service and the broken lights and the bus that comes every 40 minutes if it comes at all. She had built it because she had lived in those neighborhoods and ridden those gaps, and she had decided a long time ago that a conviction was only worth something if you did something with it. She had hired people for 18 years, and she had learned that you could not test for the thing he had. You could not ask for it in an interview. You could not infer it from a resume or a projection spreadsheet or a briefing document, though the briefing document told you he was careful and thorough and thought across more than one variable at a time. The thing she was thinking about as she stood at her desk reading the note a third time was not something you could test for. It was the way a person moved when they thought no one was keeping score. She had been on Route 9 that morning because she needed to understand her riders. She had come away understanding something she had not planned to. She picked up her phone and called her assistant and asked that a reply be drafted to a note she had received. A brief reply welcoming him to the expansion team and thanking him for what he had written. Then she set the phone down and looked at the note again. There was a line near the end that she kept returning to: a person's way of moving through the world is not separate from who they are, but is exactly who they are. She thought it was true. She thought it was one of the true things. She set the note in the upper right drawer of her desk, where she kept the other things she meant to keep, and she went to her 9 o'clock meeting. Marcus started the director role on the first Monday of the following month. He wore the navy suit jacket freshly cleaned again, and he paid his mother's phone bill from his first paycheck and sent Andre and Leon each a bank transfer with a note that said, "with interest," and he bought himself one new pair of shoes. He rode the Route 9 bus to work that morning and sat by the window and watched his city go by in the early morning light. The bus was packed the way the morning Route 9 always was, standing riders down the aisle, the same press of bodies he had stood in once, and he sat with his briefcase between his feet and his hand resting on the armrest and watched the stops come and go. The crane shelter had new decals on its panels. Now, a small thing, but the kind of small thing that a person notices when they have learned to read a route. He thought about his father coming home from the water department, his back held carefully, the particular slow way Darnell Deal had of sitting down in a chair like he was reasoning with his own body. He thought about his mother at the grocery register, hands steady on the belt, the small courtesy she extended to the person in front of her in the line, every person, every time, as though each one deserved to be greeted by someone who was glad they were there. He had never understood those things as a child, not as more than the texture of ordinary days. He understood them now as the school he had actually attended, the one that had mattered most. The bus slid down Meridian Avenue. His stop was 12th. He had 4 blocks after that. He settled back against the seat and watched the route, his route now, the company's route, and thought that in his new role he would learn every corridor the way Claudette had, from the inside, in the rain if he had to. Because the only way to understand what your decisions did to people was to sit where the people sat. He got off at 12th and walked 4 blocks with his folder dry, this time tucked under his arm and his left shoe quiet on the pavement, and he pushed through the glass doors of the building and nodded to the front desk and took the elevator to the 4th floor and sat down at his new desk and began. Somewhere in the drawer of a desk 20 floors above him, in a building 2 miles west, a letter sat folded in an envelope next to a collection of other things kept because they were true. Outside the window of that office, the Route 9 bus crossed the Meridian Avenue stop on its morning run. Riders stepped off, riders stepped on. The shelter at Crane was clean and lit and waiting. The city moved. The city always moved. It was up to the people inside it to decide how. If you've ever had someone show up for you when they had nothing left to give, share that story in the comments. The people who give without keeping score deserve to be talked about. If this story moved you, tap the like and follow along. There's another one just like this one waiting for you. This is a work of fiction inspired by everyday acts of grace. Names, characters, and situations are imagined.